you really can manipulate elections. How much can you manipulate by? Can you manipulate it by 30%?
I don't know if you saw Bret Weinstein on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple of weeks ago, but he basically said that in essence, the popularity of Trump has to outpace what he called the cheat margin.
Well, which is one of the reasons why they're so terrified of Trump. Like there's a certain amount of the stealing they can do. If let's imagine if it is dirty and you really can manipulate elections, how much can you manipulate by? Can you manipulate it by 30%? You know, because we don't know.
To your point about how much can they cheat, I call that factor, which none of us can put a number on. Maybe they can.
Right.
I call it the cheat factor, right? The cheat margin. And one of the things that I'm trying to convince people of is that it's not hopeless because they can cheat, but it means that you have to succeed at a level that exceeds their capacity to erase it.
Right. So that's what we're talking about. So we're talking about like maybe they can cheat by 10%.
Right. And what we know, and I think actually we owe Trump a huge debt of gratitude for proving something that I couldn't have told you if it was true before he won the presidency, which is there still enough democracy left in the system for something to upend the plan? Right? Because he was clearly off narrative.
Right.
And he did become president. So he did something for us that I don't know anybody else who could have done it.
And does that seem right to you, that they can sort of figure out things perhaps, but that if it's overwhelming, that really will be the only sort of electoral way out of this?
Yeah, I mean, you see on the tactics on the ground, you could debate which is nominally legal, which ones are nominally illegal, but the idea of ballot harvesting, early voting, the kinds of measures that were passed in the context of a pandemic that have now become part of the ordinary part of the way we conduct elections. You could debate the technical legality or illegality of a lot of these measures, but the fact of the matter is that has been an area where Democrats have been far ahead of Republicans. And so I don't think that a ordinary 50.1 in traditional voting is going to be sufficient for potentially A, winning the election, but B, even governing according to a real mandate that we're going to need in order to save the country. I think we need a landslide, and a landslide minus some shenanigans is still going to be a victory. I also think that, yes, as important as it is to elect Trump, one of the interesting things going on in this election, I don't think interesting for the better, but interesting as in true, is that most of the Senate candidates in swing states and even other states are trailing, like not by a little bit, but significantly trailing where even Donald Trump is polling in those states, which means there are scenarios where Donald Trump could win the White House, but we don't have a majority of the Senate, which I think would significantly clip his wings in being able to, at least legislatively, command a second term agenda. And I think that that's equally important that we actually have commanding majorities across the board. So for so many reasons, not only for actually determining who occupies the White House, we are skating on thin ice. I think that 50.1 is not a sufficient margin. But even for the purpose of governing, I think we're going to need to do a lot better than that in order to really have decisive change in this country.